Right, we're back with the next stage. As promised, this is the fuselage all cleared up. I've polished it with the 2,500 grit pad. Made a pig's ear of rescribing the body, the panel lines underneath it, but that's just me. You can't see them anyway that much, honest. The scribing tool, yeah, always just a useful thing in that. I run it down the panel lines just to make sure they're nice and free of crud, because you can guarantee in the sanding process they've filled up with plenty of it. So we have a fuselage, nice and tidy. Now, a nice tool for cleaning aforementioned crud and things away from the model. This is a really old Humbrol brush. Now, when you buy your starter set kits, because sometimes that's the only way to get the variant you're looking for, Airfix always chuck you in a brush. They are rubbish brushes for painting with. They're just too... they're not soft enough, basically, but they're great brushes for things like this. Just cut it down to a stump, and it's got enough stumpiness, for want of a better phrase, to just get it into areas of detail and get rid of the crud in your paper. Okay, ta-da, one fuselage. Now, as we've previously discussed, this is a fairly simple model at this point. We've done the interior. We're left with wings, excuse me, an engine cowling, the cockpit cover for the front, some tail surfaces. There were two of those, honest. The cover, the headrest, sorry, the spats, a propeller, a windscreen, which I have already cleaned up and cut from its moulding block. There's a nice little Venturi tube here, a tail wheel assembly, which is delightful, really is delightful. The exhaust, missing a pipe actually, which is actually came like that, unfortunately. A pair of wheels and a couple of little intakes, which I've kept one to one side so I don't lose both of them, and the pitot tube. That's it. Some decals and a figure, which wasn't obviously in the kit originally. This lot can actually be glued, with the exception of the windscreen, to this model at this point, probably in the space of about 20 minutes. Instantly. That windscreen fit is just exquisite. There you go. So I'm going to pop that in my box of bits over there out of the way, and we're going to start and assemble. Now, previously we'd found that the fit of the wings and tail surfaces was perfect. They are square, they butt nicely, there's very little in the way of joining. So we're going to just stick to our existing adhesive. Now, we've obviously still got this on the palette from before. Fill the pin locators, and we're going to run a little bit into this area around the surface. Now, I'm not going to use loads of, it's not thick, it's spread out. That's my excuse. That's my thing. Spread it along the joints. Try not to get it on the surrounding detail, because we want the super glue to hold. We don't want it to spread out into the surrounding area, so we have to sand it back. So let's do this. This should give us enough wiggle room to make sure everything is set properly, because we haven't used activator at this point. I'm quite pleased with myself because I managed to preserve that surface detail I was concerned about when I was sanding the underside earlier. So I didn't need my little templates. Now there's a slight mismatch there at the back, but it's not as much. There's hardly anything at the front, so I suspect that's a slight discrepancy in the depth of the chord of the wing. When I put the other one on, we'll see. I refresh the glue because I need a bit more. Repeat the process. A moment or two to set up. And what we are noticing is that the flap lines on the wing are not lining up with the line on the fuselage. There's obviously some kind of slight discrepancy going on in here. Itchy nose. These strakes are on the flaps. There's clearly, the flap should continue across here. There was no line scribed, so I'll need to do that. And I'm probably going to rescribe that line as a one stop line. So what I'm going to do is probably fill back that bits of that with super glue to make it all line up, and just put some little fillets in here, because the front end is pretty spot on and they line up nicely. So we're looking at a decent shape there, aren't we? So engine cowling, previously worked on, nicely done. There's some hollowing on the back of here to make it look right. If you look at pictures of the real aircraft, it's an open size cowling because that's part of the coolant. What I am going to do is I'm going to take a number 15C blade. I'm just going to try and deepen that a little bit with my blade, just to sharpen it up a little. You can tell a modeler by the state of his fingertips, because normally they're covered in cuts and scratches and bits of cut skin and things, and modeler's thumb, and yeah, so there we go. Now that's a really nice fit, dead straight fore and aft. There should be a slight lip at the bottom, and it should be flush at the top to a lesser or greater extent. Now what I don't want to do is flood the join line around the fuselage with the glue, because there is a pronounced line on the real aircraft. It's visible in the photograph, so that should do it. There we go, look at that, rock solid. Beginning to look like an aeroplane now. Now, the fin. When I was cleaning this up, I wasn't convinced it was lining up properly, and I thought some of that was me. Apparently it was. There's a slight mismatch here, which could be this part, could also be because there's a bit of crud in here somewhere. So what we're going to do is I'm going to get my nice, this is a Gunze GSI Creos MF7 file. I'm going to try and just file that a little, file that Mateek surface a little so it's nice and smooth. Again, using my stubby brush just to make sure that I've got all the bits and bobs out there. have another look at that fit now. Oh, let's get in there. You see, I can feel it rocking. So it's sitting on a pad, and I think that is because those holes aren't meeting those bits properly, and there's a bit too much to clean up down in here. So we're going to just, these 15C blades are lovely. There's a little bit of a curve to them, but they're nice and fine at the tip, so they can be used rolled into detail to give you a better purchase. But at the end of the day, for work like that, nothing beats a fine file and some real careful filing. So let's just see now. Now it's taken the rock away and we've got a better seal. So check it on the other side in case you've managed to sand it not level. See a slight gap there, that's probably my work, but it is vertical. And the super glue will give us a bit of a fill here, but what I am going to do is I'm going to open those holes up a little bit more just to make sure that I'm happy. So I've set a micro drills with one of the right size and just enough, a few twists with my fingers, clean out any residual glue and stuff in the hole, and then that should, yeah, that's fine. I still think that's not right in there. Gonna give that another couple of passes. Aforementioned engineering drawing teacher has just fainted at the fright of me using a file properly, but there you go. My woodwork teacher was a gentleman by the name of Mr. Curry, and I learnt more about life in general from that one gentleman than I did from anybody else. And nowadays we don't encourage our kids to do any form of practical work really that doesn't involve computers at schools, and I often wonder what other associated life skills we're not teaching them. But there you go. The school I went to had converted to a high school from a boys' secondary school, and I was at the first intake of the high school. The classes obviously were therefore focused quite heavily at first towards the existing curricula that they taught before. So there were things like engineering drawing and the like, and it was a very sports orientated school. A lot of it I liked. Hated being a southerner in a Yorkshire school, that wasn't good, trust me, but I learned a lot of that place. That really does bode me well into this at 53. I still go back to some of it. Right, we have a square fin with minimum join at the base of it. A little bit of a gap on the rudder, but that's actually seemingly mildly prototypical. We're looking like an aeroplane. So let's have a look at these horizontal tail surfaces. Now, my recollection of these from test fitting them previously was they were absolutely beautiful, and nothing has changed. So we can fit those quite quickly. We're using the fine end of the applicator. What I'm doing is I'm just making sure that the glue flows around the locator pins rather than just blobbing more and more on. It even looks square. Terrifying. That's pretty damn good, that. Pretty damn good. What do you know? An aeroplane. Now obviously the wheels and the assorted tiny bits are not necessarily going to get glued on at this point, because I will need to just confirm all these joins and do those little bits of remedial work here, which will involve some sanding, and and knowing me, I'm liable to knock things off. So I'm going to put those bits, oops, he says, dropping the exhaust, in my box of Bics. The old takeaway trays. What do we do without me? So, I'm not going to put the spats on yet, because again, obviously I've got still got some work to do in that area. I'm checking for fit. They look pretty good. In fact, if they're not, they're perfect. We are going to put the cockpit cover on the front cockpit, obviously, at this point, because why not? Notice there's a little bit of reshaping to do on that, where I cut it off the moulding block. There we go. So that's that piece. So it doesn't need much in the way of glue. There's a positive attachment point here, which we'll put a spot in. And then we'll just put a spot on either side of the piece itself. Lost my tweezers, there they are. A nicely moulded groove to positive locate that into place. You know what? It looks like a Caudron 600, doesn't it? Beautiful. From an era where aircraft were drawn, not comprised on computer, much like cars, and though they had a line to them, a flow to them. What I am going to do is I'm going to run a little bit of extra glue up that joint there. So I end up with a little bit of a gap. Again, user inflicted. Yeah. Not bad for a few minutes work, eh? We have an aeroplane. We have an aeroplane that will need a little bit of work here and just to tidy it up, and a bit of remedial work there to put those detail pieces back at the back. Rescribe the flaps, fine. Then it will be detail parts, so the spats and the tail wheel, the little intake, and we'll need to drill and locate the little vortex piece in there. Once that's done, that is ready for paint. Now, mounting it to paint could be tricky, But of course I make my aeroplanes for flying, so I'll either drill a hole in here, or I'll actually drill a hole through the middle of the spinner into the engine block so that a stick can be put into the nose so it can be painted. But that is going to approach finished very, very quickly, which is quite scary really, isn't it? For a kit of this quality and price, it's just stunning. Stunning, stunning, stunning. I hope you've enjoyed that. I look forward to seeing you all later. See you in a bit. Bye now.